Hello and welcome back. Tonight we are not going to a place of grand battles or royal intrigue, nor to a time of brutal survival. We are traveling to a place of quiet, monumental power, a place where the currency was not gold, but knowledge, and where the collective memory of the entire known world was gathered under one roof. We are going to the city of Alexandria in the 3rd century BCE to become a librarian at the Great Library. Forget the image of a dusty, silent modern library. The museum, or institution of the muses, of which the library was the heart, was a vibrant, thriving, and often noisy center of research, debate, and discovery. It was the first university, the greatest think tank, and the most ambitious intellectual project in history. To work there was to be at the very center of the universe of thought. Before we unroll our first scroll, I want to thank you for joining me. These quiet journeys are made possible by your presence. If you find a sense of peace and wonder here, a simple like or subscribe is a beautiful way to show your support. And as always, I am so grateful to know where this story finds you. A comment with your city and time helps to connect our scattered, quiet community. Now let the complexities of your day begin to fade. Settle into your comfort and let your mind grow still. We are about to walk through marble colonnades, to breathe the scent of papyrus and cedarwood, and to hold in our hands the fragile, precious thoughts of the greatest minds of the ancient world. You arrive in Alexandria by sea. The first thing you see, long before the coastline is clear, is the Pharos, the great lighthouse. It is not just a tower, it is a declaration. A colossal pillar of white marble, rising almost 400 feet into the sky, its polished bronze mirrors gathering the sun's rays into a beacon that can be seen for 35 miles. It is a symbol of the city itself, a brilliant, piercing light of Hellenistic civilization on the ancient shore of Egypt. The city, when you finally enter its harbor, is a shock to the senses. It is a metropolis of staggering wealth, diversity, and energy. The air is thick with the scent of salt from the Mediterranean, mingled with the exotic spices being unloaded from ships that have come from as far as India, and the ever-present, sweet, dry scent of papyrus from the city's many workshops. The language you hear is not one, but many. The dominant tongue is the fluid, poetic Greek of the Ptolemaic court, but it is mixed with the harsher tones of Roman merchants, the ancient language of the native Egyptian workers, and the Hebrew of the city's large and prosperous Jewish quarter. You are young, a scholar from Athens, trained in grammar and rhetoric. You have made this long journey not to trade or to sightsee, but because you have received the highest honor a man of letters can imagine, an appointment to a junior position at the Great Library. You are to be a grammaticos, a custodian of the written word. You are escorted from the bustling port into the Brucheon, the royal quarter of the city.
And there it is, the museum.
It is not a single building, but a vast complex of white marble, a city of knowledge within the city of commerce. You walk through lush, manicured gardens where fountains splash and scholars in simple linen robes walk in deep conversation. You pass colonnaded walkways, anatomical theatres, an observatory for studying the stars, and even a small zoo for studying exotic animals brought from the farthest reaches of the Ptolemaic Empire. And then you enter the library itself, the Great Library, the Bibliotheca. The first thing that hits you is the smell. It is a scent that you will come to know as the perfume of paradise. It is the dry, almost sweet scent of thousands upon thousands of papyrus scrolls, mingled with the sharp, clean, aromatic scent of the cedarwood oil used to treat the scrolls and protect them from insects. It is the scent of preserved thought. The second thing is the sound. It is not silent. It is a low, constant intellectual hum. It is the sound of rustling papyrus as scrolls are carefully unrolled and rolled back up. It is the sound of quiet, intense debate from a corner where two philosophers are arguing the nature of the soul. It is the gentle scratching of reed pens on fresh sheets of papyrus from the scriptorium the great copying room where the world's knowledge is being duplicated and preserved. And the third thing is the sight, the sheer overwhelming scale of it all. You are standing in a vast hall, the roof held up by towering marble pillars. The light streams in from high, clear-story windows, illuminating a space that seems impossibly large. And everywhere you look, on every wall from floor to ceiling, are the scrolls. They are not in shelves like modern books. They are housed in thousands of small square niches or armaria that riddle the walls like a colossal honeycomb. Each scroll is a pale, rolled cylinder of papyrus with a small, dangling clay or wooden tag, a syllabus on which is written its title and author. The sheer number of them is dizzying. There are, you have been told, over 500,000 scrolls in this collection.
Not 500,000 books, but 500,000 individual scrolls.
A single book, like Homer's Iliad, might be composed of 24 or more separate scrolls. This is the entire collected memory of humanity, all gathered here in this one place. The works of Homer, Hesiod, and Sappho, the tragedies of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, the philosophy of Plato and Aristotle, the histories of Herodotus and Thucydides, treatises on mathematics from Babylon, astronomical charts from Chaldea, medical texts from Egypt. If it has been written, the agents of the Ptolemaic kings have tried to acquire it, either by purchase, by persuasion, or by force. You are met by your superior, a senior librarian named Zenodotus. He is a lean, intense man with eyes that seem to see the world as a text to be critically edited. He does not greet you with warmth, but with a simple, direct question. Can you tell the difference between the Attic and the Ionic dialect of the 5th century? He asks, his voice sharp. You answer, your own Greek feeling clumsy in the face of his precision. He nods, a curt, almost imperceptible gesture of approval. Good. We have a new shipment of plays attributed to Euripides arrived from Rhodes. Most are forgeries or poor copies. Your first task will be to assist in sorting the true from the false. He leads you deeper into the library. He explains your world. The scrolls are fragile. Papyrus is brittle, it cracks with age and humidity. It is susceptible to rot and to the hunger of insects. The library is not a static archive. It is a hospital for aging texts. The work here is a constant, unending battle against decay and oblivion. He shows you a scroll. He teaches you how to handle it, not like a modern book.
A scroll must be held with both hands.
You unroll it with your right hand and roll it up with your left as you read, revealing only one column of text at a time. To leave it open to expose the entire surface to the air and light is an act of unforgivable carelessness. He shows you a damaged scroll, its edges crumbling, its ink faded. This, he says, holding it with the tenderness of a physician holding a wounded patient, is our enemy. Time negligence, ignorance. Your job is not just to read. It is to preserve, to protect, to ensure that the voice of this author is not silenced forever by the slow, grinding indifference of the ages. You are taken to what will be your small workspace, a simple wooden table and stool in a well-lit alcove. You are given your first scroll to examine.
It is a play supposedly by Euripides. Your heart pounds.
You're about to touch a piece of history, to read words that may not have been seen by anyone for a century or more. You carefully unroll the papyrus. The script is beautiful, but the dialect is wrong, just as Zenodotus suspected. The vocabulary contains words that only came into use long after the playwright's death.
It is a clever but not perfect forgery.
Your first small act as a librarian is one of critical judgment, of sorting truth from fiction. As you work, you are aware of the giants who walk these halls. Over there, you see Eratosthenes, the chief librarian, a polymath who is attempting the impossible, to calculate the circumference of the entire earth using nothing but a stick, a well, and the power of geometry. In another corner, a group of physicians are dissecting a human corpse, a practice forbidden in most of the world, but encouraged here. They are mapping the nervous system, learning the secrets of the human body, writing the first true textbooks of anatomy. In the observatory above, an astronomer named Aristarchus is developing a radical, almost heretical theory that the Earth is not the center of the universe, but that it and all the other planets revolve around the sun. You are not one of them. You are not a great discoverer. You are a humble servant in the temple of knowledge, but your work is just as vital. Without you, without the patient, meticulous, and often anonymous work of the librarians, the great thoughts of these great minds would be lost. Eratosthenes' calculations would crumble to dust. The anatomical drawings would fade. The heliocentric theory would be a forgotten whisper. You are a link in a great, golden chain of memory that stretches from the dawn of writing into an unknown future. As the late afternoon sun streams through the high windows, casting long, peaceful shadows across the hall, you look at the 500,000 scrolls surrounding you. They are not just objects, they are sleeping souls. They are the captured voices of the dead, waiting for a reader to awaken them.
And you are their guardian.
A profound sense of peace and purpose settles over you. You have traveled the known world, and you have arrived at its very center. Your work has just begun. The days at the museum settle into a rhythm that is dictated not by the sun, but by the flow of knowledge. Your life becomes a cycle of reading, copying, editing, and thinking. It is a life of the mind so intense that the vibrant, chaotic city outside the marble walls begins to feel like a distant, half-forgotten dream. Your primary task in these early months is acquisition and cataloguing. The ambition of the Ptolemaic kings is absolute. They want a copy of every book in the world, and so a vast, state-funded network of agents is spread across the Mediterranean. They are in the book markets of Athens, the harbours of Rhodes, the ancient temples of Persia. Their job is to buy, borrow, or, if necessary, confiscate any scroll the library does not possess. The most notorious of these acquisition programs is the one centered on the port of Alexandria itself. By royal decree, every ship that docks in the harbor must be searched, not for contraband, but for books. Any scroll found on any vessel is seized and brought to the library. You are part of the team that receives these ships' libraries. Imagine the scene. A crate arrives, smelling of salt and foreign wood. It is opened, and inside are the literary possessions of a wealthy merchant or a travelling scholar. There might be a well-known play by Sophocles, a treatise on medicine by Hippocrates, and perhaps something rare, something you have never seen before, a collection of local histories from a small town in Sicily, a book of Phoenician sailing charts, a volume of Etruscan poetry. Your job is to assess the new arrivals. First, is it a work the library already possesses? You must consult the Pinnaces, the great catalogue, the monumental life's work of the poet and scholar Callimachus. The Pinnaces is not just a list, it is a critical, analytical bibliography of all Greek literature. It is organized by genre, poetry, history, philosophy, medicine, law, and then by author. Each entry contains a short biography of the author, a list of their known works, and even the first line of each work to aid in identification and prevent confusion. It is the first and greatest card catalogue in history, a map of the entire landscape of human thought, and it is your most essential tool. If the scroll is a work the library already has, you must compare the two versions. This is the heart of the Alexandrian scholarly method. You lay the two scrolls side by side, your own library's copy and the new one from the ship. You begin a process of painstaking line-by-line comparison. You are looking for variations. A different word here, a missing line there. A passage that seems to have been added by a later scribe. You are a detective searching for the original text, the words as the author first wrote them, before centuries of copying errors, deliberate edits, and sloppy scholarship corrupted them. When you find a variation, you must make a critical judgment. Which version is more likely to be correct? Does one make more grammatical sense? Does one fit the author's known style better? You make small, precise notes in the margin using a complex system of critical symbols to denote your scholarly opinions. This is the birth of textual criticism. You are not just a passive reader. You are an active participant in the preservation of knowledge. You are cleaning the stream of history, removing the accumulated silt and debris of time, trying to get back to the pure, original source. Once the comparison is done, the new scroll is taken to the scriptorium. Here, a team of highly trained scribes will create a perfect new copy, incorporating any superior readings found in the new version. This new, improved copy will be added to the library's collection. The original scroll that was seized from the ship, it is returned to its owner, who has been waiting perhaps for weeks to continue his voyage. He has been paid a handsome fee for the loan of his book. He has been a pawn in the Ptolemy's grand and rather ruthless quest for total knowledge. But what if the scroll is something new? Something the library has never seen before? A thrill of discovery runs through the entire institution. This is the ultimate prize. A lost play by Aeschylus, a forgotten dialogue of Plato, a history of a kingdom that has vanished from the earth. In this case, the process is different. The work must be authenticated, as you did with the forged Euripides play. You must analyze the dialect, the style, the historical references. If it is deemed authentic, it is a cause for celebration. It is rushed to the scriptorium to be copied. Its details are added to the great pinnaces. The world's knowledge has just grown a little larger. The darkness of oblivion has been pushed back just a little further. This work is your life. You rise at dawn. You eat a simple meal of bread, olives and cheese in the communal dining hall of the museum, where the conversation is not of politics or gossip, but of mathematics, of poetry, of the latest discoveries in anatomy. You then spend your day in the great hall of the library, your world reduced to the pale, creamy surface of the papyrus, the columns of dark ink, the dry, sweet smell of the scrolls. The work is often tedious. It is eye-straining, back-breaking. You spend hours hunched over a low table, comparing texts, making notes, your reed pen scratching away. But it is imbued with a profound sense of purpose. You are a soldier in a quiet, unending war against forgetfulness. But the museum is not a completely isolated paradise of pure thought. It is a royal institution funded entirely by the Ptolemaic kings. And the king's patronage is not an act of pure, disinterested love for knowledge. It is a political tool. The library is a symbol of Ptolemaic power and prestige. It is designed to establish Alexandria as the undisputed intellectual capital of the world, eclipsing the old, faded glory of Athens. The scholars who are invited to live and work here, given a generous salary, free food and lodging, and an exemption from all taxes, are not just researchers. They are cultural trophies. They are living jewels in the king's crown. And this patronage comes with a price. You are a guest in the king's house, and you are expected to be a grateful and useful guest. The chief librarian is not chosen for his scholarly brilliance alone. He is a royal appointee, and he must also serve as a tutor to the royal children. The poets of the museum are expected to write grand epics that celebrate the Ptolemaic dynasty. The historians are encouraged to write histories that legitimize the family's rule over Egypt. A subtle but pervasive self-censorship exists within the marble halls. One does not write a philosophical treatise that questions the divine right of kings. One does not write a history that is too critical of the current ruler's grandfather. The pursuit of knowledge is absolute, but it has its unspoken boundaries. To cross them is to risk losing your position, to be exiled from this scholarly paradise back to a world where you must scrabble for a living. You see this firsthand. A brilliant but abrasive philosopher named Timon, known for his cynical and satirical critiques of his fellow scholars, goes too far. He writes a scathing poem that mocks the king's literary pretensions. One day, he is simply gone. His stipend is cut. His access to the library is revoked. He is forced to leave Alexandria in disgrace. A quiet, chilling message has been sent to all the other scholars. Do not bite the hand that feeds you. You are a junior member, far from these high-level political games. But you understand the reality. You are living in a gilded cage. It is a magnificent, comfortable, and intellectually stimulating cage, but it is a cage nonetheless. Your freedom of thought is immense, but it is not absolute. You also become aware of the fierce rivalries that burn beneath the calm, scholarly surface. The museum is a hotbed of intellectual ambition. The great minds gathered here are not always gentle collaborators. They are rivals competing for prestige, for the favor of the king, for a place in the history books. The debates in the gardens are not always polite exchanges of ideas. They can be brutal, vicious academic battles. The poet Apollonius of Rhodes, a former chief librarian, and his one-time student, the great Callimachus, are engaged in a bitter, lifelong literary feud. They write scathing, insulting poems about each other, attacking not just each other's work, but each other's character. This is not a gentle academy. It is a battlefield of the intellect, and the weapons are grammar, wit, and devastating scholarly scorn. You learn to navigate this world. You learn to be quiet, to be diligent, to attach yourself to a senior scholar who can protect and guide you. You focus on your work, the quiet, essential, and safe work of the grammaticals. You are preserving the words of the past, not creating the dangerous new ideas of the present. One afternoon, as you were working on a particularly difficult passage of Homer, trying to decide between two different readings of a single word, you have a moment of profound realization. The scroll before you is nearly 1,000 years old. It has survived wars, fires, the collapse of kingdoms. It has been copied and recopied by generations of scribes, and its survival now rests in your hands. The decision you make about this one word will be copied into the library's new master edition. That edition will then be copied and distributed throughout the world. Your small scholarly judgment today will affect how this line of the Iliad is read by students in Rome, in Pergamum, in 1,000 years you cannot even imagine. The weight of that responsibility is immense, and it is humbling. You are not just a clerk, you are a custodian of civilization. You look around the great hall at the silent, sleeping army of scrolls, at the other scholars hunched over their work. You are all part of a single, magnificent, and perhaps doomed project, to build a fortress of memory against the endless, encroaching ocean of time. And in this moment, you know that there is no other work in the world you would rather be doing. As you grow in experience and status within the library, you are assigned to a new project, one that is not just scholarly, but also of immense political and cultural importance. King Ptolemy II of Philadelphus has decreed a new, ambitious undertaking. The large Jewish community in Alexandria, which speaks Greek as its primary language, needs a translation of their sacred texts, the Torah, into Greek. The project is to be a symbol of Alexandria's cultural supremacy, a demonstration that all the world's wisdom, not just Greek wisdom, resides here. It is also a shrewd political move to integrate and appease the powerful Jewish population. This project is known as the Septuagint. The name comes from the legend that 72 Jewish scholars, 6 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, were brought to Alexandria to perform the translation. As the story goes, they were isolated in separate rooms, and through divine inspiration, each produced an identical Greek translation of the Hebrew text. The reality, as you experience it, is less miraculous but no less monumental. It is a long, painstaking, and deeply complex process of scholarship. You, with your growing expertise in grammar and textual analysis, are assigned to a team of Greek scholars who will work alongside the Hebrew scribes and rabbis. Your first task is to simply prepare the source materials. Scrolls of the Hebrew scriptures are brought to the library. These are different from the papyrus you are used to. They are written on carefully prepared animal skins, vellum or parchment, and the script is the angular, alien alphabet of the Hebrews. The text is read from right to left, and, most challenging of all, the original Hebrew text contains no vowels. It is a string of consonants, and the correct pronunciation and meaning must be supplied by the deep, oral tradition of the reader. You are entering a different universe of thought. The Greek world you come from is one of logic, of philosophy, of the beautiful, rational forms of Plato. The world of the Hebrew scriptures is one of prophecy, of divine commandments, of a single, all-powerful, and often wrathful God. It is a world of covenants, of exile, of a passionate narrative history that is utterly different from the critical, analytical histories of Thucydides. You sit for hours with one of the Jewish elders, a man named Eleazar, his beard long and white, his eyes holding a different kind of wisdom than the sharp, critical intelligence of the Greek scholars. He does not debate, he explains. He takes a passage, for example, from the book of Genesis. He reads the Hebrew consonants aloud, his voice a low, melodic chant. Then he explains its meaning, not just the literal translation, but the layers of interpretation, the parables, the moral and spiritual significance that have been passed down for centuries. Your job is to find the right Greek words. But it is not a simple matter of substitution. How do you translate the Hebrew concept of hesed, a word that means a combination of steadfast love, mercy, and covenantal loyalty, into a single Greek word? There is no equivalent. You and your fellow scholars must debate. Do you use agape love, or eleos, mercy, or do you need a whole phrase to capture the meaning? Every choice is a profound theological and literary decision. You are not just translating a text, you are building a bridge between two entire civilizations. The process is fraught with tension. Some of the more traditional Jewish scholars are deeply suspicious of this project. They fear that their sacred texts, when rendered in the fluid, philosophical language of the Greeks, will be corrupted, their holy meaning diluted. They see Greek culture, with its pantheon of flawed, anthropomorphic gods and its love for drama and rhetoric, as a pagan threat to their stern monotheism. On the other side, some of the Greek scholars, your colleagues, approach the Hebrew texts with a certain intellectual arrogance. They see the stories of the creation, the flood, the patriarchs, not as divine revelation, but as a collection of primitive folk myths, interesting for their antiquity, but lacking the philosophical rigor of Plato. You find yourself in the middle, a diplomat of the intellect. You learn to respect the deep, narrative power of the Hebrew stories. You begin to see the profound psychological and moral depth in the tales of Abraham, of Jacob, of Moses. At the same time, you use the tools of your Greek training, the logic, the grammar, the critical analysis, to help create a translation that is not just accurate, but also clear, elegant, and powerful in the Greek tongue. This project will take decades to complete. You will only work on a small part of it. But you understand its immense significance. The Septuagint will become one of the most influential books in the history of the world. It will be the version of the Hebrew Bible known to the early Christians. When the authors of the New Testament quote these scriptures, it is this Greek translation they are quoting. You are, without knowing it, helping to lay the linguistic and theological foundations for the next great world religion. You are holding in your hands the clay that will shape the mind of the Western world for the next 2,000 years. The work is a profound education. It expands your own mind beyond the comfortable, rational boundaries of your Hellenistic worldview. You begin to understand that there are different kinds of truth, different ways of understanding the world. There is the truth of the geometer, Eratosthenes, who measures the world with sticks and shadows. And there is the truth of the prophet, who measures the world with faith and divine revelation. And here, in the great Library of Alexandria, these two kinds of truth are, for a brief, brilliant historical moment, living side by side. But your life is not all quiet scholarship. The library is a physical place, and it is vulnerable. One year, a fire breaks out in the harbour district. A warehouse full of pitch and oil goes up in flames, and a strong wind from the sea pushes the fire into the city. Panic grips the museum. The fire is still a mile away, but the greatest fear of every librarian, a fear that is a constant, low-level hum beneath the surface of their daily lives, is now a real and present danger. An alarm is sounded, not a bell, but the deep, resonant call of a horn. The orderly, scholarly rhythm of the library is shattered. The senior librarians are shouting commands. A human chain is formed, stretching from the library's own deep wells and cisterns into the great halls. Buckets of water are passed from hand to hand. But the primary goal is not to fight the fire. The primary goal is evacuation, the scrolls, the 500,000 fragile, irreplaceable souls on the shelves. You are assigned to a team. Your task is to evacuate the poetry section. The works of Homer, of Sappho, of Pindar. You go to the shelves, your heart pounding with a terror that is not for your own life, but for the lives of these books. Your hands, usually so careful and steady, are now clumsy with haste. You and your colleagues begin to pull the scrolls from their niches. You do not have time for the usual careful handling. You are grabbing them by the armful, cradling them like children, and running with them out of the main hall across the gardens to a designated safe space in a stone-vaulted cellar that is believed to be fireproof. The air in the great hall grows thick with the distant smell of smoke. The intellectual hum has been replaced by the sound of running feet, of shouted commands, of the desperate, organized chaos of a rescue mission. You make trip after trip, your arms aching, your lungs burning. You run past a colleague who has tripped and fallen, dropping a precious armful of scrolls by the historian Polybius. He is on his hands and knees, tears of frustration and terror streaming down his face, trying to gather the precious, unsparing papyrus. This is your nightmare made real. The physical embodiment of everything you have dedicated your life to fighting, the sudden, chaotic, and violent destruction of knowledge. The fire is eventually contained by the city's fire brigades before it reaches the Bruchaion. The museum is saved. But the event leaves a deep and lasting scar on the psyche of every scholar. You return to the Great Hall. It is a scene of chaos.
Scrolls are everywhere, piled in heaps, some damaged, their tags torn off.
The beautiful, perfect order has been shattered. It will take months, perhaps years, to resort, to recatalogue, to repair the damage done in a few hours of panic. That night you cannot sleep. You lie on your simple cot in your small room within the museum complex, and you stare into the darkness. You think of the fragility of it all. You had come to see the library as a fortress of permanence, an eternal bastion against ignorance.
But you now know it is not a fortress.
It is a hospital, and its patients are all terminally ill. Every scroll is a dying object. The papyrus is slowly turning brittle. The ink is slowly fading. And the entire collection is vulnerable to the simple, dumb, chaotic forces of the world. A fire, an earthquake, a flood, the carelessness of a tired scribe, the ambition of a conquering king. You realize that the work you are doing is not a final victory. It is a temporary holding action. You are not saving these texts forever. You are simply buying them more time. You are copying them, translating them, studying them, and in doing so, you are impressing them onto the most resilient and the most fragile of all storage mediums, human memory. You are passing the torch. You are one link in a chain, and you can only hope that the person you pass the torch to will not drop it. The fire in the harbour was a warning. It was a reminder that the forces of destruction are always waiting. The work of the librarian, you understand with a new and profound clarity, is not a quiet, peaceful occupation. It is a desperate, unending, and perhaps ultimately a losing battle. But it is a battle you are privileged and condemned to fight. The years continue their silent, scholarly procession. You have grown into your role, no longer a junior apprentice, but a respected grammaticos, your opinions sought on matters of textual authenticity and dialect. The memory of the Great Fire Scare has faded, leaving behind a deeper, more ingrained sense of purpose and a constant, low-level vigilance. The library, having survived the threat of elemental chaos, now faces a different kind of danger, one that is far more subtle and in many ways more corrosive, the danger of politics and war. The golden age of the early Ptolemies, the era of boundless optimism and infinite budgets, is beginning to tarnish. The kingdom is beset by internal strife and external threats. The native Egyptian population, long treated as a subservient class by the Greek ruling elite, is growing restless. There are peasant revolts in the countryside, fueled by crippling taxes levied to pay for the dynasty's lavish lifestyle and constant wars. And beyond the borders of Egypt, a new power is rising in the West. A pragmatic, militaristic, and relentlessly expanding republic. Its name is Rome. At first, Rome is a distant concern, a subject of interest for the historians and geographers in the museum, but not a direct threat. But as the decades pass, Rome's shadow lengthens.
Its legions conquer Greece, its fleets dominate the Mediterranean.
The Ptolemaic kingdom, weakened by internal corruption and dynastic squabbles, is forced into a series of humiliating alliances and treaties, becoming less a partner to Rome and more a client state. The atmosphere in the museum begins to change. The pursuit of pure knowledge, of knowledge for its own sake, is now often secondary to the needs of the state. The king, Ptolemy VIII, a cruel and paranoid ruler, sees the scholars not as cultural treasures but as state assets, or worse, as potential political threats. He purges the museum of anyone he suspects of disloyalty, replacing them with his own sycophantic appointments. The open, vibrant intellectual debate of the past is replaced by a climate of fear and suspicion. Scholars become guarded, their conversations cautious, their research carefully chosen to avoid any topic that might be deemed controversial or subversive. The library itself is transformed from a center of pure scholarship into an instrument of statecraft and military intelligence. Your work, once focused on the timeless poetry of Homer, is now often redirected to more practical and urgent tasks. Imagine the scene. You are summoned not by the chief librarian, but by a grim-faced military official, a general in the king's army. He does not care for poetry. He leads you to a secure, guarded room in the deepest part of the library, a room you never knew existed. He unrolls a series of charts and scrolls on a large table. The Romans are planning a new campaign in Anatolia, he says, his finger stabbing at a map. We need to know the geography of the region, the mountain passes, the river crossings, the locations of fresh water sources. We know there are old scrolls in the collection, histories by Xenophon, geographical surveys by Hecataeus, even old Persian military logs.
Find them, translate them.
Give me a map of every road, every well, every fortress. Your role as a librarian has been repurposed. You are no longer just a custodian of culture. You are a military analyst. You and your team must now comb through the great pinnaces, searching not for literary merit, but for actionable intelligence. You must read the ancient texts, not with the eye of a scholar, but with the eye of a spy. The work is fascinating and deeply troubling. You unroll a scroll by a Greek mercenary who fought in the region 2 centuries ago. His account, which you had once read as a thrilling adventure story, is now a vital military document. His description of a hidden goat path over the mountains is no longer a piece of colourful detail. It is a potential route for a flanking maneuver. His complaint about a bitter-tasting well in a certain village is no longer a personal anecdote. It is a critical piece of information about a non-potable water source that could save a legion or doom one. You are collating data. You are cross-referencing ancient histories with more recent merchants' logs and travelers' accounts. You are creating a comprehensive intelligence dossier for the Ptolemaic war machine. You are using the words of the dead to help guide the swords of the living. The project is a profound moral compromise. The library, your sanctuary of pure knowledge, is being used to plan wars. The wisdom of the past is being weaponized, but to refuse is not an option. To refuse would be to be branded a traitor, to be thrown into the king's dungeons, a place from which no one returns. So you do the work. You find the passes, you map the wells. You console yourself with the thought that this is a defensive measure, that this knowledge will help to protect Egypt from the encroaching power of Rome. But you know that the line between defense and offense is a thin one, and that knowledge, once weaponized, can never be made pure again. This new reality culminates in one of the most famous and infamous events in the history of Alexandria. The year is 48 BCE. The Roman civil war has spilled onto the shores of Egypt. Julius Caesar, in pursuit of his rival Pompey, has arrived in Alexandria. The city is plunged into a chaotic, three-way power struggle between Caesar's legions, the forces loyal to the boy king Ptolemy XIII, and those of his ambitious sister Cleopatra. You and the other scholars try to barricade yourselves within the walls of the museum, hoping to remain insulated from the brutal street fighting that has erupted in the city. The library, for centuries a serene island of thought, is now on the front line of a world-changing war. From the high windows of the observatory you can see the Roman fleet blockaded in the harbour by the Egyptian navy. Caesar, in a desperate and ruthless move, orders his own ships to be set on fire to prevent them from being captured. The fire is a roaring success. The Egyptian fleet is thrown into confusion. But the fire does not stop at the water's edge. A strong wind carries the flames from the burning ships onto the docks. The warehouses filled with grain, oil, and papyrus erupt in a spectacular, terrifying inferno. The fire begins to spread into the city towards the royal quarter, towards you. The scene from your youth, the fire scare that once seemed like the ultimate disaster, is now replaying itself. But this time, it is real. The sky turns black with smoke. The air fills with the sounds of battle and the roar of a great, uncontrolled conflagration.
Once again the alarm is sounded in the library.
Once again, the desperate, frantic scramble to save the scrolls begins. But this time it is different. The city outside is not panicking and then returning to order. It is a war zone. Roman legionaries and Egyptian soldiers are fighting in the very streets outside the museum walls. The evacuation of the scrolls is a hopeless, chaotic effort.
Where can you take them?
The entire district is under threat. You grab what you can. You prioritize the oldest, the rarest, the irreplaceable. You see a senior librarian standing before the shelves of Athenian tragedy, weeping, utterly paralyzed by the impossible choice. Does he save Aeschylus or Sophocles or Euripides? There is not time for all of them. To save one is to condemn the others to the flames. The fire, history tells us, was eventually contained before it destroyed the main library building itself. But the ancient accounts are clear. Several warehouses and annexes near the port, which were used for storing new acquisitions and scrolls awaiting copying, were completely destroyed. The number that is often cited is 40,000 scrolls, 40,000 voices, 40,000 sleeping souls, annihilated in a single afternoon of fire and war, lost forever. A library the size of a great modern university's collection turned to ash as a mere side effect of a Roman general's tactical decision. You stand in the gardens of the museum, the smoke stinging your eyes, and you watch a part of the world's memory turn to black, fluttering cinders that rain down like a foul grey snow. You see a half-burned fragment of a scroll carried on the wind land at your feet. You pick it up. The elegant Greek script is charred at the edges. It is a line from a philosopher, perhaps Heraclitus. War is the father of all things. In that moment, you feel a despair so profound it is a physical illness. Your life's work, the patient, meticulous day-by-day battle against the slow decay of time, seems like a child's game in the face of this. Time is not the greatest enemy of knowledge, war is. The brutal, stupid, and utterly indifferent violence of men is a far more efficient agent of destruction than the slow fading of ink or the crumbling of papyrus. The battle for Alexandria eventually ends. Caesar is victorious. Cleopatra, with his backing, is installed on the throne. The city slowly returns to a semblance of order.
But something has been broken forever.
The library has been wounded grievously. The collection is diminished. But worse, the spirit of the place has been violated. The illusion of a sacred, protected space, an island of pure reason insulated from the messy, violent world outside, has been shattered. The library you now understand with a bitter clarity is not just a building that exists in the world. It is a building that is of the world, is subject to its politics, its wars, its fires. Its survival is not guaranteed by the brilliance of the minds within it, but by the stability of the world around it. and the world is entering a new, violent and uncertain age, the age of Rome. The fire of 48 BCE was not the final death of the library, as is often misremembered, but it was the beginning of the end. It was the first and most dramatic of a series of wounds, of purges, of budget cuts, of civil strife, of rising religious intolerance that would, over the next few centuries, slowly bleed the great institution to death.
You, the aging librarian, are a witness to this decline.
You help to sort through the wreckage, to identify the charred fragments, to compile the devastating list of what has been lost. And you continue your work. You copy, you preserve. You teach, but you do so now with the full, tragic knowledge of its fragility. You are no longer a soldier in a war you believe you can win. You are a keeper of the flame in a gathering darkness, and you do not know how long you can keep the light alive. The fire set by Caesar's ambition was a violent, traumatic wound, but the library, in its diminished state, survived. The decades that follow, however, bring a different kind of decay. Not the swift death of the flame, but the slow, chronic illness of neglect and ideological change. Egypt is now, for all intents and purposes, a Roman province. The line of the Ptolemies, ending with the dramatic death of Cleopatra, is extinguished. The new masters of Alexandria are pragmatic military men. They are governors and prefects sent from Rome, and they do not share the Ptolemies' passion for scholarship as a symbol of prestige. They see the museum and its great library not as the intellectual heart of the world, but as a curious and expensive local institution. The vast royal stipends that funded the library for centuries begin to dry up. The acquisition program, the great global dragnet for scrolls, ceases. The flow of new knowledge into the halls dwindles to a trickle. The army of scribes in the scriptorium is reduced. The great project of copying and correcting the world's texts slowing to a crawl. You are an old man now, one of the senior scholars, your hair as white as a fresh sheet of papyrus. You have become a living repository of the library's golden age. You walk the great halls, which are now quieter, emptier. There are fewer scholars. The vibrant, often contentious debates in the gardens are a thing of the past. A kind of intellectual torpor has set in. The institution is no longer a place of bold, new discovery. It is a museum, a place dedicated to curating the glories of a past that feels increasingly distant. Your work has changed. You are now a teacher. Young, wealthy Romans are sent to Alexandria to complete their education, and you are tasked with instructing them in the classics. You unroll the great scrolls of Homer and Thucydides for them, but you see a frustrating lack of genuine curiosity in their eyes. For them, this is not a passionate engagement with the foundations of their culture. It is a form of intellectual tourism, a necessary polish for a career in Roman law or politics. They are not here to learn, but to acquire a veneer of culture. But a far more profound and dangerous change is happening outside the library's walls. A new religion is spreading like wildfire through the teeming streets of Alexandria. It is a religion of the poor, the enslaved, the dispossessed. It is Christianity. At first, it is just another of the many strange Eastern mystery cults that have found a home in this cosmopolitan city. But this one is different. It is fervent, exclusive, and intolerant of the old gods. Its followers do not see the great library as a repository of wisdom.
They see it as a monument to paganism.
The scrolls of the great Greek philosophers, with their endless debates and their questioning of all things, are, to this new faith, a form of blasphemy. The poetry of Homer and Sappho, with its tales of lustful, capricious gods and its celebration of the human body, is seen as decadent and immoral. The scientific texts, which seek to explain the universe through reason and observation rather than divine revelation, are a direct challenge to the authority of their one true God. The very idea of the library, the gathering of all knowledge, the critical comparison of all texts, the belief in many paths to wisdom, is fundamentally at odds with the core tenet of this new religion, that all truth, all necessary knowledge, is contained in a single book. You witness this clash of worldviews firsthand. A group of young, zealous Christian monks, their faces lean and their eyes burning with conviction, come to the library. They do not come to read, they come to preach. They stand on the steps of the museum and denounce it as a temple of demonic lies. They call the scholars idolaters, hoarders of a useless, profane knowledge that leads only to damnation. The few remaining Greek scholars try to debate with them, to engage them with the tools of logic and reason that have been honed in these halls for centuries. But it is like trying to reason with a storm. The monks are not interested in debate. They have the absolute, unshakable certainty of faith. Their truth is not a proposition to be argued, but a revelation to be proclaimed. The city of Alexandria becomes a battleground between these two irreconcilable worlds. Riots break out between pagans and Christians. Temples are desecrated, scholars are attacked in the streets. The intellectual tolerance that was the bedrock of Alexandria's greatness is crumbling, replaced by the violent certainty of religious fanaticism. The library, the ultimate symbol of the old pagan intellectual world, becomes a primary target. It is not destroyed in a single great fire. Its death is a slow, piecemeal affair, a death by 1,000 cuts. During one particularly violent riot, a mob of Christian zealots, incited by a fiery sermon from the bishop, breaks into the museum complex. They are not interested in the main collection of Greek literature, which they cannot read, and whose value they do not understand. They head for a specific target, the Serapeum. The Serapeum is a magnificent temple dedicated to the Greco-Egyptian god Serapis, and it houses a smaller, but still vast, daughter library. This collection is more public, more accessible, and it contains many of the most important works of pagan philosophy and science. To the mob, it is the intellectual fortress of their enemy. You are too old to fight, too old to even run. You can only watch from a distance, your heart a cold, dead stone in your chest, as the mob swarms the temple. They do not just burn the scrolls.
That would be too quick.
They are driven by a righteous, orgiastic fury to annihilate every last trace of this profane knowledge. You see them dragging armfuls of priceless scrolls out into the temple courtyard. They are laughing, chanting hymns, their faces illuminated by the fire of their torches. You see a man, a simple dock worker, take a scroll, perhaps a unique copy of a play by Aristophanes, perhaps a lost history of the Persian Wars, and use it to light his torch. You see a woman, her face contorted with piety, methodically, painstakingly, tearing the pages of a philosophical treatise by Plotinus into small, useless strips, scattering them like confetti. It is a festival of destruction. It is the murder of memory. Each torn scroll, each burning page is a voice from the past being silenced forever. It is a lobotomy performed on the brain of the world. You are witnessing the end of a world, not just the end of a collection of books, but the end of the intellectual tradition that created them. The tradition of critical inquiry, of open debate, of the belief that the pursuit of knowledge in all its forms is the highest calling of humanity. This new world that is being born in fire and fury does not need a library. It needs only one book. It does not need scholars who ask questions. It needs monks who have the answers. As you turn away from the terrible sight, your spirit finally broken, you understand the final tragic irony. The librarians of Alexandria dedicated their lives to fighting the slow, natural decay of papyrus and ink. They fought a noble, patient war against the quiet forces of entropy, but they were utterly unprepared for a new and far more powerful agent of destruction, the righteous, absolute certainty of a closed mind. The fire in the Serapeum is not the end of the library, but it is the end of its soul. The main collection will limp on for a few more generations, a ghost of its former self, a relic in a world that no longer values it. Its final, quiet disappearance from the historical record will be so gradual, so undramatic, that no one will be able to say for certain which year, or even which decade, the last scroll was lost or the last librarian walked away. You spend your final years in the quiet, echoing halls, a custodian of a dying god. You are no longer fighting to preserve knowledge for the future. You are simply mourning it. You read the old scrolls not to edit them, but to remember them, to keep their voices alive in your own mind for a little while longer. You think of the great minds you knew in your youth. Eratosthenes, who measured the world.
Aristarchus, who placed the sun at the center of the universe.
The translators of the Septuagint, who bridged two civilizations. Their work, their brilliant, revolutionary ideas are now in danger of being forgotten, dismissed as pagan lies. The world, you realize, is not on a straight, upward path of progress. It is a cycle, it is a tide, and the great, brilliant tide of Hellenistic reason is now receding, leaving behind a long, dark beach of faith and dogma. Your final act is one of quiet, personal defiance. You take one small, precious scroll, a collection of the lyrical, deeply human poems of Sappho, a work you know will be condemned as decadent and immoral by the new order. You do not leave it in the library to be torn apart or to rot from neglect. You take it back to your small room, and in the final days of your life, by the light of a single oil lamp, you commit its verses to the only library that can no longer be burned, your own memory. You are doing what librarians have always done. You are buying time. You are passing the torch, even if only to the darkness of your own impending death. Your life ends as it was lived, in quiet service to the written word. You are buried in a simple grave, a forgotten scholar whose name is lost even to the great institution you served. But our perspective, the one that travels through time, remains. We now pull back, away from the personal, and watch the long, slow, and tragic final act of the great library and the world it represented. The destruction of the Serapeum was a mortal wound, but the main library, the original museum, lingered on, a ghost in a city that was rapidly transforming. The final centuries of its existence are a story of slow, inexorable decline. Roman civil wars, economic collapse, and the growing power of an anti-intellectual Christian orthodoxy all took their toll. The funds for acquiring new scrolls and copying old ones vanished completely. The community of resident scholars, once the most brilliant collection of minds on the planet, dwindled and disappeared. The library ceased to be a living center of research and became a silent, neglected archive. The final, definitive end is a subject of historical debate. There was no single, cataclysmic fire that consumed the entire collection, despite the popular myth. Its death was a slow unraveling, a quiet fading into oblivion. One of the last recorded mentions of the museum as a functioning institution is in the 3rd century AD. By the 4th century, the historical records fall silent. The building itself was likely destroyed or heavily damaged during the wars that racked the Roman Empire in the late 3rd century. What was left of the scrolls was likely scattered, some perhaps rescued by private collectors, some destroyed in the fighting, and many simply left to rot in the damp, abandoned halls. The spirit of the library, the very idea of it, was extinguished by a formal decree in 391 AD. The Roman Emperor, Theodosius, a zealous Christian, ordered the destruction of all pagan temples throughout the empire. The Serapeum, which had been partially rebuilt and still served as a center for pagan learning, was definitively destroyed by a Christian mob, its remaining scrolls and statues annihilated. With this act, the classical, intellectual world of Alexandria was officially over. A new era, the Age of Faith, had begun, and its first act was to burn the books of the old world. Let us pause now and consider the sheer, staggering magnitude of what was lost. It is not just the 40,000 scrolls from Caesar's fire or the collection in the Serapeum. It is the slow, unrecorded disappearance of the entire 500,000 scroll collection. What did those scrolls contain? We know from fragments and references in the works that did survive that we have lost almost everything. We have only 7 of the 123 plays written by Sophocles. We have only 19 of the 92 plays of Euripides. We have lost the complete works of most of the great Greek lyrical poets. We have lost the vast majority of the histories, the philosophical treatises, the scientific manuals. We lost the astronomical catalogue of Hipparchus, which mapped the positions of the stars with a precision that would not be matched for another 1,500 years. We lost the complete anatomical works of Herophilus, the first physician to conduct systematic human dissections, who discovered the nervous system. We lost the histories of Berossus of Babylon, which chronicled the ancient Mesopotamian kingdoms. We lost the geographical works that mapped the known world, from Britain to India. We lost countless works of mathematics, of engineering, of botany. It is a void in the memory of our species. The period that followed the final collapse of the Roman Empire and the disappearance of institutions like the library is often called the Dark Ages. It is a controversial term, but in one sense it is profoundly true. A great light of knowledge was extinguished, and for 1,000 years much of the Western world stumbled in a twilight of forgotten wisdom. Let's watch what happens to the knowledge that was lost. The theory of Aristarchus that the earth revolves around the sun, a theory that was debated and studied in the Library of Alexandria, disappears. For the next 1,400 years, the geocentric model of the universe will dominate Western thought, and those who dare to question it, like Galileo, will be persecuted. The advanced mathematics of the Greeks, the geometry of Euclid, who worked in Alexandria, the calculus-like methods of Archimedes, are largely forgotten in Europe. The engineering skills that built the aqueducts and the Parthenon are lost. The world does not just stop progressing. In many areas, it actively regresses. Medical knowledge degenerates from the clinical, observational science of Herophilus back into a system of superstition and faith healing. The understanding of sanitation, of history, of the natural world all wither. Where did the knowledge go? It did not vanish completely. The torch that was extinguished in the West was, for a time, carried by others. In the great cities of the Islamic world, in Baghdad, in Cordoba, in Damascus, a new golden age of science and philosophy begins. Arab and Persian scholars, deeply respectful of the old Greek wisdom, actively seek out and translate the surviving texts. They take the works of Aristotle, of Ptolemy, of Galen, and they not only preserve them, but they build upon them. They make revolutionary advances in medicine, in mathematics, inventing algebra, in astronomy, in optics. The knowledge of the ancient world is kept on a kind of life support in the great libraries of the Islamic world, and it is from there, centuries later, that it will slowly begin to seep back into Europe. During the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance, scholars will travel to Spain and the Near East, rediscover these lost texts in their Arabic translations, and bring them home. The reintroduction of Aristotle's philosophy of Greek mathematics and medicine will be one of the key sparks that ignites the Renaissance and, eventually, the scientific revolution. The West had to rediscover what it had already known and then forgotten. The 1,000-year detour, the long, slow and painful climb back to a level of scientific and philosophical understanding that had already been achieved in the halls of Alexandria, is the profound and tragic legacy of the library's destruction. Think of the world we might be living in now if that knowledge had never been lost. Imagine a world where the scientific revolution began 1,000 years earlier. A world where the heliocentric model, the principles of anatomy, the advanced mathematics of the ancients were never forgotten, but were continuously built upon. The mind reels at the possibilities, but the loss was not just scientific. It was a loss of a way of thinking. The spirit of the Library of Alexandria was one of critical inquiry, of intellectual tolerance, of gathering all the evidence before making a judgment. It was a world that understood that there could be multiple competing theories for the same phenomenon. The world that replaced it for a very long time was a world of dogma, of absolute certainty, of a single, revealed truth that could not be questioned. The murder of the library was also the murder of doubt. And without doubt, there can be no true progress. Let your mind rest now on this long, slow arc. The image of a vibrant, brilliant city of knowledge, slowly dimming, its lights going out one by one. The image of a great torch being extinguished in one part of the world, only to be relit centuries later with a spark saved in another. It is a story of profound loss, but also of incredible resilience. It tells us that knowledge is more fragile than we can imagine, that a library is a delicate ecosystem that can be destroyed by the changing climate of a culture. But it also tells us that an idea, a true and powerful idea, is harder to kill than a building or a book. It can go dormant, it can be forgotten for centuries, it can be buried under layers of dogma and ignorance. But eventually, if the conditions are right, it can be rediscovered, it can sprout again. The ghost of the great library has haunted us ever since. It has inspired every great library that has been built since, from the Vatican Library to the Library of Congress. The dream of a universal library, a place that contains all knowledge, has been reborn in our own time, in the vast, chaotic, and beautiful digital world of the internet. We are, in a way, all librarians now. We are all custodians of a vast and fragile collection of information. And we face the same challenges as our ancient counterparts in Alexandria. How do we sort the true from the false? How do we preserve this knowledge against the decay of digital formats and the fires of ideological conflict? How do we ensure that the voices of the past remain accessible to the future? The story of the Library of Alexandria is not over. It is a story we are still living. It is a quiet, powerful reminder that the work of preserving memory is the most important and the most fragile work of any civilization. As you drift towards sleep, let the soft, rustling sound of the papyrus scrolls be a gentle reminder of the precious, precarious, and unending human quest to know. You are an old man now. The fire you witnessed in your youth and the later, more terrible fire at the Serapeum are now just stories you tell, memories that feel as brittle and faded as the oldest scrolls in your care. You have outlived the golden age of the library. You have outlived your friends, your rivals, and even your enemies. You are a living relic, a custodian of a world that no longer exists, walking through the quiet, echoing halls of its greatest monument. The library is a ghost. The great stipends are a distant memory. The royal patronage has withered. The throng of international scholars has dwindled to a handful of quiet, elderly men like yourself, keepers of a flame that is now barely a flicker. The great halls, which once buzzed with the sound of 100 debates, are now vaults of profound silence, broken only by the whisper of the wind through a cracked window or the scuttling of a mouse in the walls. The smell has changed. The clean, aromatic scent of cedar oil and fresh papyrus is gone. It has been replaced by a new perfume, the smell of dust and slow, gentle decay. It is the smell of a great body that is slowly, peacefully returning to the earth. Scrolls are dying. You see it every day. You will pick up a scroll of a lesser-known philosopher, and it will crumble in your hands, the papyrus flaking away into a fine brown powder. You are no longer fighting a war against oblivion. You are simply managing a hospice for dying ideas. Your work is no longer one of acquisition or even of copying on a grand scale. The scriptorium is a ghost town, its empty tables layered with dust. Your work, your final self-appointed task, is one of memory. You have become a living archive. Each morning you select one scroll from the shelves, one that you know is particularly fragile, one whose voice is in danger of being silenced forever. You take it not to a scribe's table, but to a quiet, sunlit corner of the garden, the one place where life still feels vibrant. You unroll it with the infinite, practiced gentleness of a lifetime of handling these precious objects.
And you do not copy it. You consume it.
You read the scroll, and then you read it again and again. You read it aloud, your old, reedy voice giving sound to the silent ink. You are committing the words to the only library that is now safe from fire and decay. The library of your own mind. You are memorizing the lyrical poems of Sappho, which you know the new, austere religion of the Christians will condemn as decadent. You are memorizing the witty, satirical plays of Menander, the histories of near-forgotten city-states, the complex, beautiful arguments of the Stoic philosophers. It is a desperate, hopeless, and deeply personal act of defiance. You cannot save the 500,000 scrolls. You cannot save the library.
But you can save a few fragments.
You can become a single walking, breathing scroll, a carrier of a few precious, endangered thoughts. One day a young man comes to you. He is a Roman, the son of a wealthy official, sent to Alexandria for a classical education. He is bright, curious, but he is a product of his time. He sees the library not as a living soul, but as a curiosity, a magnificent ruin. He finds you in the garden, reciting a passage of Homer to yourself. He asks you, with genuine, polite curiosity, why do you bother? No one reads these old poems anymore. The world has moved on. There are new books, new truths. You look at this young man, at his clean, well-fed face, at his confident eyes that see the world in such simple, certain terms, and you feel a wave of profound, weary sadness that is so deep it is almost pity. He sees the words, but he cannot hear the music. He sees the past as a dead thing, a collection of facts to be learned for an examination, not as a living presence, a conversation that spans the centuries. You try to explain, you try to tell him that these scrolls are not just old poems, but they are the source code of his entire world. The language he speaks, the laws he obeys, the very way his mind forms a logical argument, all of it has its roots here, in these crumbling rolls of papyrus. You tell him that to forget these voices is to forget who we are, to cut ourselves off from our own roots, and to imagine that we are the first people ever to have loved, or grieved, or wondered at the stars. He listens politely, but he does not understand.
He cannot. The world has changed.
The great, interconnected ecosystem of classical thought has broken down. He is a man of the new world, a world of singular truths and diminished questions. He thanks you for your time and leaves you to your strange hobby. You are the last of your kind. In the final year of your life, you undertake one last journey. You walk slowly through every hall, every colonnade of the museum and the great library. It is a pilgrimage of farewell. You stand in the great hall and you remember it as it was in your youth, teeming with scholars, alive with the hum of debate. Now, the shelves are half empty, not just from the fires, but from theft and neglect. Great gaps like missing teeth punctuate the walls. The dust motes dancing in the shafts of light are the only things that move. You walk through the scriptorium and run your hand over the smooth, empty surface of a copying table. You can almost hear the ghostly echo of 100 scratching pens. You stand in the observatory and you look at the celestial charts on the walls, now faded and peeling. You remember Eratosthenes, his eyes bright with excitement as he explained how he had measured the shadow of the earth. You are walking through a city of ghosts. Your final stop is your own small alcove, the place where you first worked as a young apprentice, the place where you condemned a forged play and began your long life of service. The table is still there. You sit on the simple stone bench, you close your eyes. You are not just in a room.
You are in a memory.
You can smell the fresh papyrus. You can feel the thrill of your first important task. You can feel the entire arc of your long, quiet, and meaningful life. You have not been a king or a general or a great philosopher. You have been a librarian. You have not changed the course of history. You have simply tried to save it. You have stood watch over the memory of the world, and you have kept the light on, even as the oil in the lamps ran low. You die a few weeks later, a quiet death in your sleep. Your passing goes unremarked. There is no one left who understands what has been lost with your final breath. The small library of poems in your mind, your last desperate act of preservation, is now gone forever. And so the last librarian of the great library is gone. The last living link to its golden age is broken. The silence that follows is absolute. As you, the listener, drift now in the quiet of your own room, let the story settle. The great tragedy of the Library of Alexandria is not that a building was burned. The tragedy is that a way of thinking was lost. The flame that was extinguished was the flame of boundless, unified human curiosity. But the story is also one of hope. It is a testament to the quiet, enduring power of the individual human mind to act as a vessel for memory. The story of the librarian is the story of all of us who read, who learn, who remember, and who pass on what we know. Every time you read a book, every time you tell a story to a child, every time you share an idea, you are participating in the same sacred, fragile project that began in those sun-drenched halls in Alexandria. You are a keeper of the flame. You are a link in the great golden chain.
Let that thought be your final comfort tonight.
The great library is gone, but its spirit is not. It lives on in every library, in every school, in every quiet room where a curious mind engages with the words of the past. It lives on in you. The work is not over. The watch never ends. And now your own quiet, nightly work of memory and restoration is about to begin. The librarian of your own mind is about to go on duty. May your archives be peaceful. May your dreams be full of light. Sleep well.